You can't look at this and say, they weren't Africans who were doing this. Why would they put somebody else's face?
Well, it's an artistic rendering.
And they didn't have equipment to make thin lips and to make narrow nose, so they had to use that, and it wouldn't make. But then the little details of a fingernail, they had the equipment for that, but not for the thin lips.
Is it important, though, to say that Africans did this?
Oh yes, if no one had said the Africans didn't do it, it wouldn't be important. But since that had been said for no reason at all, they wanted to satisfy themselves that although they were not in history, that they did it. Now, since it is that the people whose ancestors did it could not say anything about it in the past, now is the time that they declare to the world whose legacy it is.
Now, what is the significance of the figures being seated?
Well, the Pharaoh was at rest and he's sitting on his throne.
Okay.
See, next to him on his side is his throne.
And because Nefertari's feet are one in front of the other, she's alive.
Oh, the whole thing is alive. And you know he's alive, he's sitting on the throne. The only how you would know that he's dead if he had crossed his hands. No, even if the foot together is sitting down, he has to have crossed his hand, which you could do sitting down also, like an X. And then you will see the flail in one hand.
Yes.
And the crook in the other.
That means dead.
He's dead.
How was this work done?
By chisel?
They gouged out, this is granite.
Yeah.
And they gouged it out.
They chisel it out. Now, in some work, where they didn't chisel, they take the work and they put a thin layer of plaster.
Yes.
And when the plastic was damp, they put a plate of the design, lightly. Then they came and draw it over it. But in this case, where they got to chisel into the material, it was done with hammer and chisel.
And what about
when in place, not on the ground? First they put the stone up, then they do the finishing while it's up.
colors? Where did they get their colors from?
From clay, from tree barks, and they made their own color. Flowers different way. They made different kinds of stain and dyes with the color.
To last this long, huh?
Oh yes, because they put it in the mortar, and it goes in, it penetrates. Though Akhenaten lived one mini fraction of the time that Ramesses did, his impact on society, his impact on Judaism, Christianity, Islam. For example, this one man changed the religion or the worship, I prefer the term worship than religion per se, of the entire nation of Egypt. He left no doubt that the ancients believed in a common deity, a god. He changed it from the worship of the great god Amun-Re-Ora, and with subordinate gods with different names, to the worship of one deity alone by the name of Aten, A-T-E-N, using the same symbol, the disk of the sun, but adding thumbs, and elongated thumbs to it, thus the beginning of monotheism. He died before Moses was born and preached monotheism. The same Akhenaten preached nonviolence. Long before the wrong today talking about nonviolence, he had spoken about it and lived it. He brought his cousin Sementari to do the administrative work of the government as they had two kings, while he concentrated on peace with other neighboring states. To prove it, he decommissioned most of his officers, reduced the size of the Egyptian armed forces to the point where Egypt was almost defenseless against its enemies. He weakened Egypt. This man of the arts and everything like that was the name Amenhotep IV. Otherwise, he changed his name from Amenhotep to Akhenaten.
Aswan is located south of Cairo, up the Nile. Remember now, the Nile flows downward to the north. Here, the pace is tranquil and most beautiful. The people here are, as Dr. Ben himself would say, burnt of skin. On the afternoon of our arrival on a sailboat called a felucca, Dr. Ben unfolded the story of the ancient civilizations of the Nile.
According to a great high priest of ancient Egypt by the name of Hunefer, Hunefer, he wrote a papyrus. It's known as the papyrus of Hunefer, the paper of Hunefer. He said, we came from the beginning of the Nile, where God happy dwells, at the foothill of the mountain of the moon. The mountain of the moon, there are two places in Egypt, in Africa named Mountain of the Moon. One is between Ethiopia and Kenya and Tanganyika, called Kilimanjaro, means Mountain of the Moon. The other is in Uganda, Rwenzori. It also means Mountain of the Moon.
What god is this temple honoring?
More so goddess.
Goddess.
Goddess Aset or Ast, otherwise called Isis. Isis is the sister of her husband, god Asaru, Asar, otherwise called Osiris. People in the States arguing all the time that the ankh comes from the cross. Not at all. There is an ankh and there is a cross. Ankh there and a cross to your left and up. They mean two different things, have always meant two different things. Never has one been the other.
Best known because the boy pharaoh's tomb was discovered intact in the early 1900s. Egyptians working under an Englishman named Howard Carter came, quite by accident, upon a few steps leading downward, this in November of 1922. Carter was contacted and he ordered the digging to continue. They found the tomb of King Tut, a sensational find. The treasures of this tomb were brought out into daylight for the first time in thousands of years. Works of solid gold, alabaster, and other precious minerals.
You notice that the holy water is made up of ankh and was scepter. Ankh, was scepter, ankh, was scepter. The ankh is the key of life, the symbol of the key of life. The was scepter is the highest authority of the kings.
So baptism didn't take place when you were an infant?
Oh no. Well, baptism goes back for thousands of years, long before the story of Jesus and John the Baptist.
But contrary to the way we've been taught to think of baptism, it took place when you were grown.
Oh yes. When the Hyksos were here, that's the first foreign conquerors of Egypt.
They stood up to them?
They came from Asia, along the Oxus River. They came and destroyed the 13th dynasty and started the 14th. By the time of the 17th dynasty, people here, kings from here, a man by the name of Amus I, got mad and organized the forces against the Hyksos.
To drive them out?
To drive them out. He got killed on the battlefield and his son, Thutmose I, took over.
Continued the fight?
Continued the struggle. He got killed on the battlefield. His daughter, who took after him, took over above the second because he was too young. She took over the battle and pursued the Hyksos.
That daughter would be
Hatshepsut. Makare Hatshepsut.
She was a rough lady.
She was a strong woman.